Hello, welcome again to another Talent Grind Live today on Friday, April 11th, 2025, the day that Alex Mann made me nervous. Alex, man,
Mhm.
how are you doing today?
I'm here. I'm here.
I'm Mr. Punctual, baby.
Oh,
You're in a different environment now. Are we in the man's stronghold today?
we are. I'm taking advantage of work from home, where you can.
Today, I'm wearing an old school Bolt t-shirt. This is pre-round A. I've reconnected with a couple of early members of the Bolt team recently.
Yeah, it seems like that company is retroing itself, I think. Is that a way to describe it? Or
I've never stopped believing in Bolt, man. They're going to come out with an everything app. I think they're still going to crush it. I think having a shopper network of 85 million different checkouts is infinitely valuable.
I thought
Infinitely,
that is a
for sure.
I mean, just the scale of it. I mean, God knows what's going to happen to the products that are sold via Shopify. I come from a part of the world in Asia. We will see. We will see. But yeah, I
I
think
mean,
too.
with 3D printing and with new technologies, I think there's still a lot of opportunity out there for people. I think that we went through this era of mass globalization. I think that the pandemic opened our eyes to the downfalls of that when critical supply chains are entirely in China, you know?
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of a reshaping of the global order right now. It's interesting. As we continue here into April, the job market is still fuzzy. The economy is still bouncy. And it still seems like the pressure relief valve has not been triggered yet.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, I've had calls with people that are have icing hiring for the time being, and not just in supply chain and manufacturing, but in software as well. And
Would you say they're freezing hiring?
yeah, people are just like not hiring because of the uncertainty. So whether there's an impact or not, the impact of the uncertainty is people just going, you know what, we're going to hire for the time being, and we're just going to
Yeah.
keep our head. And I find that now, whether that's a trend or whether that's just like what I'm hearing, but I think anecdotally, I think I wouldn't disagree with what I'm hearing. I think that makes sense for a lot of companies,
It's
unfortunately.
just the unfortunate part, and I'll tell this to anybody, if you're out and looking, I realized this a long time ago. When you're doing sales or you're looking for a job, you literally are living in minutes to hours to days. When you're trying to interface people who are inside of companies, they are living in weeks and months. And their timeline is much, much slower than your timeline is. And so it requires everybody to have a kind of to be able to really develop an infinite amount of patience, is what I've learned over my years.
You mean from the candidate's perspective and how?
Yeah, absolutely. Like only follow up once a week. And I would alternate an email one week, a phone call the next week, an email the next week, a phone call the next week. And I would only contact them once a week, even though every fiber in my being was like, "Oh, I contact them Monday. Let me ping them on Thursday." No, you got to stay patient.
It's interesting because I think, the general consensus is that people are running out of patience.
Sure. But this could be the big test, right? Like I'm a man of faith. And I feel that I'm constantly being tested and constantly pushed to evolve and grow and change. And it could just be, look at what the signs in your life, what they're telling you to do. It could be that maybe it's time for you just to develop more patience. It could be it's time for you to pivot. I had a talk yesterday with a woman. It was not very comfortable. She's a senior director. She wasn't a senior director at a really large company and was laid off 4 years ago and did some consulting work and has
Yeah.
struggled ever since then. And I had to be the bearer of bad news. I had to let her know middle management is being swept away. I mean, Amazon is just doing another big round of layoffs and they're going right after middle managers. Smart companies are flattening their orgs, right? And I told her, I'm like, you need to start building. Like you worked in product, you led engineers. AI is flattening everything. It's reset things. We can all start over now with these new platforms. And I'm like, you need to start building things. Like I've got a good friend, David Tell, who was the founder of Qual. He works with Cursor. He works with Lovable. He's building products. He's vibe coding. He's not an engineer. He's building products. He's adding to his portfolio, right? I think that's what everybody needs to do.
You raise an interesting point in the sense that you saw that the founder of Shopify this week.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
I wouldn't call it
Sure.
influence, but in people, the kind of cultural reset. Whatever version, and anybody can Google this. I mean, it's all over LinkedIn and it's like all over the news. It is a leaked memo. I would say leaked on purpose kind of memo kind of thing, because it's like, why would you think it wouldn't be leaked? And one of the things that was interesting was like, how do they vet for AI and how do they think about it? And we've spoken about this before in terms of thinking about AI from an intellectual curiosity perspective. It's like, when you're interviewing people now, I would expect people to have built something or done something or say something very interesting about AI, the workflows, irrespective of whether you're an FP&A or you're a graphic designer or you're a recruiter or you're whatever. For any kind of role, I think there does need to be like an appetite and a sort of intellectual curiosity about AI. And
You'd be surprised how many people are not doing that still.
oh, I'm not surprised. I mean, I'm not surprised at all.
Middle of the country, if you're in the middle of the country and you're not using AI, you're missing a huge arbitrage opportunity.
I mean, that's a key word. I always use the word edge, but yes, arbitrage.
It's Gary V, dude. It's Gary V. It's
Yeah.
all about arbitrage. It's all about you figuring out the newest technologies before other people do. You figure out how to get them to work. You put them into production. You start using them. You get the benefits from them before everybody and their grandmother jumps on the gravy train.
I mean, 1,000%. Did you read the his memo?
Gary V's memo?
No, the founder of.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I read that. And that really realigns with everything that I've been saying on these Talent Grind Lives, right?
Yeah.
And what I've been saying to people privately, like this is worse than the Great Recession because there's a brand new technology component that companies understand can optimize the business and will lead to even better margin, better return, and greater value down the road. And like business is brutal. People are greedy. If they're going to squeeze, I mean, it started with the Clavio guy, right?
Yeah.
It started with him, right? I'm automating everything. I'm laying people off.
You mean Klarna?
Yeah, the Klarna guy. Like it started with him, but that's what I mean. Toby said, if you want to hire, you have to explain and make a business case for why we can't use AI to do this.
Totally. Yeah. Like it is a baseline expectation. I think that's in the head.
You also said every single person at Shopify needs to be using AI. Every single one.
Yeah. And I mean, I get it. And it makes sense because that's where the arbitrage is. And I mean, look, you're building products with N8N and Cursor and a myriad of different tools. And they themselves are rapidly evolving in scope and in power. And it's like, you've already got 9, 12 months on that. Like your runway has already been that. Other people need to catch up with that, and if you need to normalize this. Like, AI is not as simple as, oh, I use ChatGPT. Like, it's not. As in, there's so much more to the complexity of it that can give you the edge. Like, I think like people miss one of the fascinating things I think about AI and the adoption in the workplace is that people think it is ChatGPT. For the most part, I would imagine if you surveyed non-tech company people and you said, what is AI in the workplace? I would imagine that you would probably have a huge portion of that pie saying ChatGPT. And then everybody else talking about workflows or, optimization or, whatever form of like actual productivity use case, people are not in the majority probably thinking of it that way, which is interesting because we've had ChatGPT since 2022. So it's not like this is.
Yeah, but there's so many changes happening. Are you familiar with Anthropic's model context protocol?
Okay, you're going to have to explain that.
Right. So listen, so Anthropic came out with a brand new standard for essentially connecting AI assistants to systems where data lives, right? So we're going to be building this into team source. This is on our roadmap. And essentially to simplify it, what it means is in the future, you will be able to set up your operations in team source the way that you want it. And you'll be able to direct the activity that you want to happen there using Claude or Chat GPT or any other LLM.
Yeah.
So the LLM interfaces are really the only interfaces that you really, not the only, it's an alternative interface that you can use to be productive in the future. You can go into the product and you can use its interface and maybe it gives you more data and maybe you like it better. But then if you're out working in an AI and you're just getting things done because now Claude can search the web. It's going to be a matter of time before, you'll inherently have sourcing software built into these LLMs that are as good as what HireEasy and Seek Out and Find Them and all those guys are doing.
Yeah.
And then it's really going to come down to, the reason why we build a team source, it's going to be coming down to how are you managing and building relationships?
Then it brings it back to the people question again. I think the AI tools, an unlock for like really good people, like good workers can't be replaced. You're still going, someone's got to drive the bus, but the bus can be very fast. But I think to your point as well, ultimately, this is a business of relationships.
Yeah. And it's going to be more so that in the future.
That's the edge. That will become once AI becomes a table stakes.
For instance, referencing back to my old Bolt colleagues, like when I was in Bolt early, before they were 30, probably the most fun I've ever had with the startup, other than working with Minnow to build their team.
Yeah.
I just loved that early Bolt team. They were nice people. They were good people. They had a vision. They wanted to build a platform. They taught me a lot. And when I left Bolt and this entire time I've been building, I have made it a point to keep up with these guys. I contact them regularly. I catch up with them. I keep a database, like an app flowy of all my relationships and the last time I contacted them and try to stay up on it. Just not to fall off, but to stay up with people. And I really do feel, Alex, that we've been predicting the future on this show. Nobody's paying attention to us because we're early on and no people aren't paying attention. We've been saying that there's going to be 10,000, 100 to 1,000 person companies more than there are today.
I think that's one of our iconic quotes,
It really is, right? And it's going to come down to relationships, right? Like we're leaving this ZERP client server into the cloud transactional business world, and we're going into a new golden era, which is like the early business world of relationships and people creating companies of value, but it's going to be magnified 100 times, 1,000 times what could have been done in the past.
Like just for people to get their heads around this, like we've had companies that have been 10,000 people sized for 80 years.
Yep.
This is a sea change opinion, like point of view, as in if this does happen, how, like we go back to what you're saying at the beginning with Amazon and the example of, we're seeing a lot of middle management getting cut out. And we talk about that a lot on this, but that's what's going to happen. You're going to hollow out non-essential. I hesitate to say non-essential.
No, they're non-essential.
They're
me, man. This
yeah.
my entire career. I interviewed a principal scientist at Motorola early in my career, and he was so frustrated with Motorola. Motorola was like the big company in Chicago, right? Like
Yeah.
I went to high school with a couple of like their grandkids, and these kids had brand new cars every year. They didn't want for anything, right? The Galvin family. And I talked to one of their principal scientists, and he's, you know what happens here? I'm like, what? There's 8 different layers of middle management here, and there's people who do nothing here but go to 7 to 8 meetings a day, 5 days a week, and they don't actually do anything.
Yeah. And that's like what AI is replacing, not going to work.
That's why big companies are shrinking. And this woman I talked to this week, that's what she was doing. I'm like, what do you do? Like, I really love leading teams and inspiring people and bringing together business stakeholders. And everything she was saying to me was like, not building, not relevant, not going to get a job.
Yeah. Like it's indisputable, but I do hesitate to say that non-essential because there are great people that get promoted into those roles. I just think that like the reality of middle management is that, it has been a punchline for as long as Office Space and Woody Lohman and Death of the Salesman have existed. And fundamentally, like how fulfilling are those roles other than like going
Fulfilling, but like you said, there's great people who get promoted into them and then they don't leave.
Yeah. And
I call it the director trap. I tell people all the time, listen, I know it took you 20 years to get that director title, but if you want a new job, you should be looking for a manager title, or you should be a senior IC. And the minute that gets through, I had a neighbor like this. He was out for 4 years almost. If you look on his LinkedIn, you can see it. And I was taking a walk with her family one day, and I'm like, "What's going on?" He told me, I'm like, "Bro, you got to look for a manager job. Let go of the director title." He had a new job within 90 days, and now he's worked back up, and he's in a really good position with the company, and he's working right now. But he needed that little bit of a nudge. And this is what these big companies and these big company environments have conditioned us to do. But it's not good for society long term. It puts too much power into too few people's hands. It allows people to create fiefdoms. It's not good long term economically for companies. Directors are constantly optimizing their organization so they can get their next bonus. But that optimization for their next bonus is not necessarily what's in the best long term interest of that business.
I mean, yeah, I don't disagree with anything you're saying. I
Mhm.
think I do think it's fascinating that AI is sweeping so quickly.
I'm so glad I started building 4 years ago and put myself outside of my comfort zone and really pushed myself to stay current, to stay on the tip of the spear,
Yeah.
to fundamentally understand how business is changing.
I mean, I was super more moved by you. It's fascinating in the sense that like when we talk about it like this and when we think about it, I'm like, what was the last sea change? Like in my career, like,
iPhone.
it was iPhone and apps. And
Well,
like
cloud, probably the cloud.
but cloud even predated that. You know, like there were competitors to AWS in 2012, but like really there's three of them now.
Yeah, I mean, I was at Google in 2013 working in Google Cloud, and like
Yeah.
it was us, AWS, and Azure. And AWS was they had 80% of the market. And between Microsoft and Google, we were fighting for the scraps.
Yeah. And I mean, that's gonna it. And but that isn't like a sea change in a sea changey kind of way to white collar workers. And what I mean by that is non-engineers. Like you think about apps on iPhone. Okay, great. Like amazing business is born from it. But like fundamentally it was like a new engineering pathway. You know, it was like we can build apps and build businesses there. And then you think about something like AWS, it's what does your sales guy or your manager, your marketing guy, your ops person really understand about AWS or like cloud infrastructure? Like, not really. Whereas we're at something that's sweeping through the whole organization, you know, and is redesigning what it means to be an employee at a company. And I find that kind of fascinating. I was actually reading something. I was reading something from Fortune magazine that I saw on LinkedIn, and they were talking about how stressed managers were. And I'm like, yeah, dude. I mean, everyone should be stressed. Like, 41% of global employees are stressed, and here's why. And like the four things it said was like the number one thing it suggests is the pressure of constantly adapting. And I'm like, yeah, this is the new normal now that we find ourselves in. You are going to have to adapt or die. And, you know, I do references in a lot of interviews I do, where I tell people to read a blog post on First Round Capital's blog called Giving Away Your Legos and Other Commandments for Startups. And it is basically about the premise that, like, when you join a startup or when you join a tech company, like, to thrive,
From 2015 too. I haven't read this one.
yeah, it's actually really good, and the metaphor is really strong, and basically, it's like when you're a kid, like, you wanna keep all the Legos to yourself, but as you get older, you start giving away your Legos to other people, and you don't need them as badly. And basically, the thought behind the metaphor is that, like, when you join a tech company, like, when you join, say, a 10, 20 person company at a specific job, and there's a job, like, you've got your role description. This is what you will do in this job with your roles and responsibilities. Well, that company goes to 40 people from 20 in 6 months, or goes from 40 to 80 in another 6 months. So in 12 months, you've gone from 20 to 80 people. Do you honestly expect your job to be the same? It shouldn't be. And there's a
The
go.
formula is that every 6 months you should be giving away half of what you're doing.
Yeah.
Somebody new.
Exactly. So you're giving away your Legos, and it's like in a startup environment. Imagine you've been at a couple of blitzscaling companies now, like Bolt, for example. There are people that are not comfortable in that environment.
Probably they bring early people in that are great at certain things, but then as the company scales, they reach the limits, but they don't want to let go of the power.
There you go. So this is the thing. I think AI is like forcing everyone to give away their Legos. Yeah. That's what comes to mind when I think about like how it's ripping through. Is in if you think about just getting rid of middle management. If the CEO turned around to you tomorrow and said, "Hey, you, we're growing so quickly, we don't have a HR or we don't have talent department." They said to me, for example, okay, and they said, "But you're a great guy. So we need you. I trust you just to go stand up talent. And I'm like, dude, I've never done that in my life. And he goes, I know, but just go and figure it out. Giving away my Legos would be saying yes to that, where I have no experience in it, but it's like you're at the startup, like that if you can pull it off, you'll be in a position to hire the right people to then come in and
Yeah.
perfect them. And I think a lot of people don't think about what it's like to work in a fast growing environment when that's the case. Like you need to be super comfortable as an employee to get in and do whatever needs to be done, irrespective of your job role. And I think now more than ever, with AI ripping through, like if I was in a company that was letting its entire middle management go, I'd probably be looking around going, okay, I need to grab something by the bull of the horns, regardless of my
What production can I maintain and manage?
exactly. And
What
I
can I build that's going to bring value to the organization?
1000%. I think I honestly, an AI is going to drive this.
So much.
Yeah.
I read this article a long time ago and it's resonated with me. If I ever built a big business, somebody was like, they were just really done with titles. And if you're not familiar, there's two viewpoints per titles from the early days of the modern commercial internet in the Valley. There's the Mark Zuckerberg point of view, which is that titles are valuable. And because you were a VP at another company, probably means you're just a manager at Facebook.
Right.
And then there's the Mark Andreessen viewpoint, which are titles are worthless. Give the people the titles they want to bring the best people in to get in the job. I actually think both are wrong. I don't remember who came up with this, and if anybody knows, I'd love if you could put in the comments in our show. But somebody wrote like a Medium article that was like, "This is all bullshit. You need three layers in a company. Your title is your job function. You would be sales and partnerships. Then you have a lead, which is the manager, sales and partnerships, comma lead. And then you have an executive, sales and partnerships, comma executive. That's it.
Yeah.
That's all the titles that you need in a company. Flat organization. Go listen to Lenny's podcast with Brian Chesky from Airbnb last year. Brian, for me, coming up with from baby boomer companies, it was the most hilarious. I was rolling on the floor laughing as Brian was describing what he learned from building a big company that started to be turned into divisions,
Yeah.
was becoming very political, and everybody was creating power centers and people were fighting with each other. And he looked at the app and he had not changed in 4 years. And he fired a lot of people. He like laid off his entire product management organization. He started to build classic CPG type of pods where you have cross-functional people working around initiatives, working around growth, working about new product updates, getting people. And he got builders together with a minimum of management. And I want to see changes in the app. I want to see
Yeah.
improvements. I want to see forward motion and growth.
Do you know what's interesting about that? I actually know somebody who joined that company recently. He joined Airbnb. And I was like, oh, you're very senior to be like joining a company like that. You know what I mean? Like it was the tenor and tone of the conversation. And it was like, yeah, like culturally now, what they're looking to hire, for example, is more senior people. So like less junior, they'll pay them, but they'll want the doers. So if you're coming in, you're still doing. So I was like, oh, that is very interesting that they're foregoing like more junior employees, but they're hiring more senior people, but they're doing like you are like impact roles, basically like impact player kind of stuff. Like you're making impact or not, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, no, that's really wise. Like,
It's
so many senior people, like, if someone's in their 40s or 50s, they are not over the hill. They are founts of knowledge, okay? They've seen things scale. They know where things break. They've been through the rigmarole. They most likely just want to do good work with good people and build things to create financial security for themselves. What more do you need in a teammate?
You absolutely hit the nail on the head there. You've absolutely,
I
yep.
talked to a CMO I worked with previously who was an early Microsoft person. This guy is a killer. Can't find a job. Starting to become depressed about it. And all I could say to him was like, listen, just hang in there until this AI equalization is done. And all of a sudden, all like we've been saying, all this, the creative class now has the ability to create products. We start seeing, 10-person billion-dollar unicorns, right? That's coming. And I would say if you're building one of those, you should look for a mix of what Alex was talking about previously, which is we call that the general athlete, right? Someone maybe younger in their career, has beginner's eyesight, comes from a really good school, is able, you can say to them, hey, listen, I need you to go learn best practices of customer success, stand up that function for us, figure out what the software is, get it installed, get it going. And then, we'll look for someone to take over that function from you. But we need to hire the best person. We want to hire once for this. We want to take our time hiring, but we need this customer success thing now. We can't wait for that person. That's like the most coveted role. Now, if you mix those people and this is what Bolt did. I mean, I was a contractor, but I basically led recruiting there for a while until for quite a bit. And like they brought someone like me in who was really experienced. And they put me with these young general athletes who are using growth techniques. And out of that came everything that I've been building for the last 4 years. And it was inspiring to me, you know? But
Yeah.
I'm also a risk taker. I used to jump out of airplanes for fun. So I'm not a good prescriptive, like if I believe passionately in something, I will throw everything out and I will go pursue that with vigor and intensity. But that's just who I am, you know?
That is you. That is you. So you said me something earlier, which I did laugh at. I've got opinions on this, which was about Indeed. You want to give?
Yeah, let's talk about that because it ties into an article I read about Mercor.
Oh, okay. I'm excited. Let's talk about
Yeah.
Indeed. Yeah, that's corner.
What I shared with Alex, it just popped up on my Google feed the other day. It's this, I've never even heard of this before, this job board doctor blog. It's talking about, so it was Chad Soai from Chad and the Cheese.
Oh, I was talking to him. I was talking to him yesterday.
Right. He put it up on LinkedIn. I think this link, and I looked at it. And just to read
Great
this
guy.
track, essentially what they're trying to do is they've got a new API and they're forcing everybody to bring disposition codes into their database. Now, I read another article a few weeks ago, and I don't know what happened. I went looking for it, and I couldn't find it again. But what Mercor is doing is they're getting companies to give them performance data on employees. Okay. Both of these things are going to break. And I'll tell you why. Most recruiters are going through so many thousands of resumes that, like, I would guarantee that their disposition codes are probably 50-50 at best.
Okay.
Really good recruiters
Well,
will
they
give
know
you.
what a disposition code is.
So a disposition code is the reason why you reject someone. So most people would just select lacks experience, right? There could be location. There could be a lot of different disposition codes for why, you rejected the candidate or the candidate reject you. As someone who's been a recruiter for over 25 years, the recruiters pay no attention to these. Recruiters just select whatever they think is closest to the reason why they're rejecting the person, if you're lucky. More often than not, they just pick like lacks experience and they reject everybody with lacks experience.
Yeah.
Disposition code data is fundamental. And so what they're trying to do is to take this data and align it to people's profiles and to build profiles of what type of workers people are.
Yeah.
That's the same thing Mercer's trying to do. But I think there's going to be a backlash against this when more people find out about this, because this is intimately private data that's between you and your employer. Most employers will only verify that you've worked at a company and what your title is. And if you sign a release, then they can give you what the salary they made. They won't give you any more information from that. And it's every single company is its own fiefdom. Every single company is like a kingdom in a faraway land. They all have different cultures. They all have different SOPs. They operate in different ways. So most of them have shitty managers who are playing politics games. And if you are in with them and they like you and you're good, then you don't have anything to worry about. And if you're not, then you've got something to worry about. And there's bias everywhere. And trying to take this information in aggregate and tie it to people in terms of what type of worker they're doing, in my opinion, is destined to fail. Alex?
Oh, I mean, so much to unpack there. I think, it is good to also highlight that like Mercor, it's really for like engineering interviewing talent is where they are today.
We're there today, right?
Yeah. And I mean, they raised a $2 billion valuation in February or March. And obviously they are the darlings of talent acquisition space today. I did hear that, OpenAI is a huge chunk of their business.
Sure.
So, and obviously OpenAI is looking to hire like crazy and also build its model like crazy. So obviously if you can get a feeling for what makes an engineer and they'll be able to understand that, I think super powerful. And I don't think people realize yet. I mean, how I would think about that secular shift of like data privacy inverted commas. Do people realize that they're interviewing and that's what's happening to the data when they're interviewing, as opposed to like how traditional interview is like it's in an ATS and it's used there for reference and that is all it's used to do. Well, I think, that's quite interesting. It's funny because I've spoken to recruiters who use Ellie, and yeah, I've had some people say to me that I would say 99% of people will say yes to have their calls recorded, but there are certain people that don't even want a call recorded, like
Oh,
candidates.
dude. I've met people who don't even wanna click a Calendly link,
Yeah. So
who don't wanna give me their Social Security number on their pre-employment paperwork. "Bro, we need to file taxes for you. We need your Social Security number. You don't need my Social Security number."
I love how you
It's funny with their personal data, as they should.
yeah, I mean, I get questions that like, like obviously coming from Ireland and coming from like the European Union, so to speak.
Yeah, the whole
That's really born out of a German anxiety. That's where that comes from. And they don't like to be spied. Why? Because they had actual formal spying in their country until 1990. So like and I get it. Like people don't want to be tracked, like the right to be forgotten, all these different things. So I like, not that I'm suggesting that Mercor in so early in its process is in that space, but like it's very much a watch this space in terms of how it evolves, in terms of the amount of data that it's going to get on people, I think is quite fascinating. But it's a darling today. And darlings rise,
Right,
darlings
because
fall.
they have a novel idea, but they don't have enough business experience, and they've not worked at enough scaling companies, and they haven't hired people who've done that.
Okay, I wouldn't shit on
Give them
her.
a diversity of
Oh,
give them a diversity of opinion,
yeah.
because they've said on target, "We're in the office 6 days a week. We're a bunch of 22-year-olds. That's who we hire."
Yeah.
That's not the recipe for success.
I mean,
I've
for
said forever, like, a young person who raises that much money should hire a bunch of elder millennial and Gen X who've been there, done that, who've actually been building, and bring them into lead functions and get out of their way. Set a strategy, keep the money coming in, and get out of their way.
I also applaud them. I'm like, YOLO, man. If you can raise that kind of capital and you think
Sure.
you've got a problem, is this a problem to solve? Is this a problem to solve?
So are we going into a world where it is even more rigged against you based upon data that's generated by people that you have no control over, who maybe don't really know you or are biased towards you, but are in a position of power where they can generate data and feed it into a system that's then, I mean, now talk about, like, when I was a kid, it was always like your permanent record, your permanent record. And then when you like graduate from high school, you realize the permanent record's bullshit. There is no permanent record other than like an arrest record, or
Yeah.
maybe like a public record of how many times you've been sued, right? That's your permanent record. But what these people are trying to do is create a permanent record on every single employee based upon biased data.
Yeah. It's like that Black Mirror episode,
Yeah, but no, it is like that. The
The
social
yeah, the
girl,
Instagram
right?
credits, or if when you do your
Like,
interaction.
she was super high, and then she had a bad day, and then she just bottomed out
Well,
and couldn't even rent a car. Like, that's not the type of world we wanna live in. I don't wanna live in
you-
that world. I don't want my kids to grow up in that world.
I think it's fascinating. I mean, I find all this tech kind of very fascinating. I just am like, you know, we'll see what happens. You know what I mean? I mean, what the future state of that kind of business will be. It's interesting. It's interesting that Indeed is doing it more than something like a startup. Like startups, we got an idea, we'll raise capital, we'll get after it. Something like Indeed, interesting.
They've been around forever. What
Yeah.
are they gonna do now? They're trying to own everything. I honestly, I have not used Indeed in decades.
I mean, I've got a lot of experience with it, given that hourly worker hasn't landed.
Yeah. Ever since I stopped doing high volume recruiting, I
Yeah.
have not used Indeed at all. It's not part of my toolkit. It's not part of my world. And it just shows how big the recruiting world is, right? Bullhorn is huge. I've never used it.
Yeah, I mean, what did you send me? There was like that Indeed, that in that Indeed article, the idea that I said I've got a lot of opinions on this. Indeed getting rid of their search bar and bringing it back. One of the things about that I thought was fascinating about that was like, probably one of the reasons they brought it back is candidates will just go to ZipRecruiter or in those kinds of candidates will just go elsewhere. Jobs are jobs. Like the people do not give a shit if it's Indeed or ZipRecruiter or Monster or any of these. It's just get me a job as fast as you can. And then that's where like the employer on whatever factory or restaurant or whatever business that is hiring through Indeed needs to have an entire hiring process so honed in to capture that person. Because there's so many trash resumes. And I did see a stat about 2 years ago on Indeed that said a person who's sitting on Indeed and applying for jobs is applying for 40 jobs at any given time. Hello. And do you know what I mean? That doesn't scream, if you want that person, you better offer them the job straight away. You know what I mean?
Alex, did you go Undercover Boss?
I've watched some episodes of it.
There's a great, I don't know if everybody heard, but Hooters has filed for bankruptcy.
Had the CEO on my podcast.
And he did an Undercover Boss. It's one of the greatest episodes of Undercover Boss ever. Because he basically uncovered a manager who was just a blatant sexist, who was manipulating the young women he had working for them. He would line them up and make them play reindeer games, which were unprofessional and out of line so that they could have the night off or something like that. But in the same company, there were other franchises or other locations that had really professional general managers who really cared about their employees and were taking care of them and were a credit to the organization. And until we fix what really good leadership looks like in companies in terms of managing people and getting the best out of them, caring about people and helping them develop their careers and their lives, creating really solid businesses that have a long-term core focus on the people who help them be successful. We have to fix all of that before we can just start automating and taking data from companies and building profiles on people so that we can just automate, talent acquisition to the point where no recruiters. It comes back to relationships, right?
Yeah.
And so that's fundamentally that is, I think, the big question today when it comes to HR tech. Are you building to enable better relationships, or are you building to work people out of the process so that you can collect rent?
It's hard for me to say I'll speak for everyone here, but I just think it's just a secular shift in how we think about filling positions and what we can do. Like how many more 1,000 people companies versus 10,000 people companies? It comes back to that. And I don't think it's like as nefarious or like pernicious. I just think it's just if you're building a company, AI is an edge. Like you mentioned the word arbitrage, Gary V's arbitrage earlier. Why would I hire somebody if I could have an AI do this? If you think about, say, what I was saying earlier, where we were talking about tariffs, and it's okay, companies are just, let's wait and see how this chaos is going to play out and not hire. AI can make your business better in that period of time. You know what I mean? As in, you could survive better than you could in 2009, or you literally had to let people go. And that was that. How would you optimize your business? At least this is happening at a time when this chaos is happening. At least, companies can
Yeah, and if you're older,
play.
think about what it is that you were really good at in your career. What segment, what sliver of the company? Go out, find who are all the top software SaaS products out there that are trying to solve that problem for companies and become an expert in them. Start to develop relationships with the people at those companies. Let
Yeah.
them know who you are. You could become an influencer for them,
Well,
right? Or maybe there's not a product out there and you can go and use a no-code tool to start to build one. You can start vibe coding, get Cursor, figure out how to use an IDE, start working with Lovable, start spending all your time with AI, build a strategic plan, build a business model. AI can help you with all of that 100 times faster than you, because I've been doing this all along. In the early days when I built business models for my business, it took me weeks, man.
yeah.
Weeks of intensive focus and study and research. And now I could basically just put a whole context thing into an AI, help me build this, help me build that. What am I missing? Do a SWOT analysis. Where are the holes? What am I not thinking about?
I mean, it's wild, and
Wild.
like it's wild, and like to give context to people here, and you mentioned, we've talked a lot about building personal brands for recruiters in this pod,
Yes.
a lot. I've recently been in discussion with an influencer, and I say influencer in the sense that like he has the same amount of followers as you,
Mm.
and we were talking about he kind of is now starting to create kind of more like skit workplace kind of comedy content. Got like 30 million impressions in Q1 on content that he's been creating. And he's, yeah, like, as in my brand has blown up. I get asked to speak at conferences now. I kept inbound coming from this. And I'm like, dude, that is it. And how hard was it for you to get to that? You know what I mean? Is in like, it's all doable for people. If you ask them at Christmas time, that wasn't a dream. It's April 11th. If you put in the grind, it can happen for you. If you like, I'm not here to preach, but like I was blown away by that.
But I think that there's room for people to be entertainers, and I think there's room for people to be thought leaders, which is that's the tack that I'm trying to take. I don't necessarily want to create entertainment. I just want to give people value and get them thinking differently.
Yeah.
And I think there's a place for both.
I mean, there's a place for anything. It says it commit to something.
It's just different personalities. Some people might just want the entertainment. Other people might be hungry, ambitious drivers who are like, where are the nuggets? How do I get ahead?
Yeah.
I didn't do well in school, but I know I'm smart. How do I get ahead? Come listen to me. That was me. Like I literally failed out of multiple colleges, started my career in collections, worked my way up to customer service, took a pay cut to recruiting, and drove that all the way to a career at Google.
Yeah. I mean, that's the dream, isn't it? I mean,
Literally, live the American dream.
if there's one employee brand out there that you want to work for, it's Google.
Pretty much. And then I've reinvented myself multiple times. I reinvented myself after I left Google and I got rejected by 30 different companies. And I found out Google gets your foot in the door in the valley, but that's it. So I had to reinvent myself as a recruiting operations expert. That got me my first global recruiting management position. And then from there, I just went back into recruiting ops and started paying close attention to recruiting technology. I was one of the first 20 users of HireTool, which became Hire Easy. I helped them build that product. And I learned and I grew and I kept reinventing myself, right?
Yeah.
And I think that what I've been doing is the formula for the future. You cannot be static anymore. You need to learn until you're not learning anymore. And then you need to figure out what the next level is. And then you need to reinvent yourself and start learning and get yourself to that next level. And then you need to keep doing it. There's this old adage that would say, what got you here isn't going to get you there.
I like that.
That's always been in the back of my head. I always know when I'm starting to stall out. That's why I started doing these live streams. That's why I started doing podcasts, why I started doing all this influencer stuff.
And you're pushing it, by the way.
Thank you. I'm so far behind and I haven't put up Meet My Podcast in 2 weeks because I've got so many that I need to edit.
No.
And I think, as I've mentioned to you before, I absolutely hate video editing because I'm a perfectionist. So I spend way too long on it. But shout out to Descript, who was founded by the Groupon guy, which, like, I don't know if you ever heard any of the early Groupon stories. I'm from Chicago. They had an invisible mascot for the company, and that invisible mascot had their own office. Nobody could use the office because it was the invisible mascot of the company's office.
And then it was an iconic business in 2010, and that spawned its own. I know a friend of mine who created a company called Redeem and Get, which was like, how do you manage your daily deals as a business? Like, it was that impactful. I mean, funny, like how now people just use it for massages. If you want to get a discount at a spa or beauty treatments, like that's literally it. It's amazing to think how big it was for the mind share it had. Like people thought about it on.
He was out of Chicago too.
Yeah, amazing,
Crazy.
I mean, amazing. And I think there's a bunch of deal companies that kind of came out of Chicago, like Belly's another one, or like kind of customer loyalty kind of stuff started coming out of there. And again, probably inspired by something like Groupon, but such a time, it's different. Daily deals was different.
Well, I think the state of recruiting is still foamy. The state of the world is scary, especially if you're a middle manager and later in your career. I certainly hope you've been investing well and stockpiling that cash away. And if you're not starting to rethink and reinvent yourself, then this is a heads up that you probably should.
And last,
And on that note, we will leave it. Thank you for joining us again. I'm Michael Doran. This is Alan Spann. We appreciate you joining us for Talent Grind Live. Sometimes it's Tuesday, sometimes it's Thursday, sometimes it's Friday. I know we're supposed to be consistent. I'm busy, but you'll see us once a week. Bye.
bye bye.